Okay, you're live.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ken Evans here, President for the Urban Chamber of Commerce. I'd like to welcome you to session 3 of our Ducks in a Row series. Today's session called Protect Your Bits and Bytes, where we'll be talking about information technology and the role that it needs to play in your successful business, especially if you're a small business. Just to give you some background, Ducks in a Row came out of the fact that we had individual companies that from time to time were having some challenges getting access to some of the resources that were out there. So what we decided to do is to host a series of seminars where we would talk about what are some of the things that we need to make sure that people do or don't do in some cases to make sure that their business can not only survive, but thrive in these COVID-19 times. But more importantly, even before COVID-19, there were probably some things that businesses should have been doing or not doing to make sure that they were run in an efficient and an effective manner. Hence, we came up with this Ducks in a Row seminar series. Again, today's session is called Protect Your Bits and Bytes. No seminar like this is possible at the Urban Chamber without the ongoing corporate support of our sponsors such as Charles Schwab Bank. So we'd like to say thank you very much to Charles Schwab Bank for being a sponsor for Capital Connections. Next slide, please. Here we go. I just wanted to show you the Charles Schwab Bank sponsor slide there just to make sure that we give them their acknowledgement. As far as the format for today's discussion, the agenda, we're doing the welcome right now, plus making sure that everybody gets settled in before we get into the meat of today's presentation. We'll be talking about how to protect your company and information. To that end, we're glad that today's moderator is an individual that has been recognized regionally and beyond for her information technology accomplishments. And then at the same time, she always finds a way to contribute and give back to the business community as well as the overall community. So our moderator for today will be Dwana Malone from Tech Queen Systems. Also, I want to make mention of the fact that she has an entity called Nevada Help Desk that is great for solving your small business solutions. At the same time, she works with nonprofits and corporate companies as well. So she'll be our moderator for today. We'll also have some time towards the end where if you have questions, please post them to the chat room. We also know that some individuals may be following via our Facebook Live feed, so you're also free to make comments and type questions in there. And then Delisa will make an attempt to get that information to our moderator so that they can ask the question or make comments on whatever is entered there. In addition to our moderator, we also have at least one other individual that'll be joining us, Garland Norris. He's a business owner with TechG Consulting, and we welcome him as well. He is an IT person that helps set up systems as well as provide support, both strategic and then in the tactical operation of your business. So we're glad to have him, and he'll be joining the conversation as well. So without further ado, let me turn the conversation over to our moderator, Ms. Dwana Malone, and she and Garland Norris will steer us through this afternoon's conversation. Thank you very much, Dwana.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Thank you. And thank you, Delisa, for all your hard work behind the scenes as well, and to the entire Urban Chamber staff and Board of Directors. Thank you. It is my pleasure to serve as the moderator this afternoon on such an exciting topic. And I tell you, protect your bits and bytes. There is just no greater, I think, topic that we should be discussing in this moment than protecting your data, because after all, if you have all this data not protected, and God forbid something happens, which at any moment, anything can, you never know. If it's not protected, wow, what a devastating thought. I don't even want to think about it because today's focus is going to be about protecting it. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm so excited because one of the panelists that Ken just introduced, Garland Norris of TechG, we're going to just have an open dialogue with just a couple of questions, just the way that we'll flow today. We're going to throw out some scenarios. We're going to have some questions, some dialogue. We're going to have an interactive for our audience to jump in, chime in at any time, ask your questions on the chat. And then we will make sure to address every single question during the time allotted. So let's start off by Garland. Do you have your video cam on? We're going to go right ahead here. Your audio or video today? Either way, I'm fine with, but I want to just see and make sure you are there, Garland. And we'll start with our dialogue for our first question of today that we can have and just interact on this subject. And if anyone wants to chime in again with a question, anything that you're unclear on, go right ahead and jump right in as needed.
All right. Good afternoon. Unfortunately, my video's not working very well today, so I'm going to be audio only.
Okay, no worries at all. That is perfectly fine. And we're going to start with our first question here. And we want to know, what is one of the biggest areas of concerns or issues that you see businesses are facing since the pandemic when it comes to information technology? What are you finding? And feel free to interact on any live scenarios that you're encountering with your customers or that you're finding for the last even 6 months or so that is becoming a common issue. What are one of the largest that you've seen?
I think the biggest challenge we're having is access to data. It's one thing for all your employers and everyone else to come into the office and you be able to control your information by physical access. But now we're in a situation where people are at home and you still need access to a business critical and sensitive information, but at the same time, you really have to limit that because you don't have that span of physical control that you have. You have people that may use their computers for multiple businesses. You need to make sure that that information doesn't get accessed by third parties outside of your control that you may not even know, maybe able to view it. Just the simple fact that people lose information, just like they lose their keys, they lose laptops, they lose data, and you got to be able to make sure that that information remains as secure as possible, so there's not any more additional exposure for your business. So, I mean, in this case, the biggest thing and change is that the idea of information, just because it exists out in the cloud, doesn't mean that you don't have to use the same type of controls and the same type of limitations that you would or try to enforce internally through different mechanisms.
I am so glad that you subtitled that access to data, because I was just sharing, one of our colleagues have had a relative to pass, and all of that information, they could not access the data through their phone they just happen to be the power of attorney. And we've had, of course, business owners to pass away in this season. It seems like a lot of people are passing away. And the access to data seems to be a very important issue that one don't think about when they're alive, that if you don't have a good succession plan in place, who will access your critical data? Sometimes we walk around, say, oh, we're not going to trust certain people or some people within the organization. So a lot of times business owners, if you're a sole proprietor, you're holding on to it by yourself and no one else have that information, or holding on to it for yourself, and not disclosing that information, whether it's lack of trust, whether it's just you wanting to be the only one that is responsible. So can you speak to succession plan for businesses? Because that's one definitely in the spirit of this season of COVID that I'm finding the succession plans are not in place for businesses, and therefore the others are left scrambling, trying to find the key crucial information. And in some cases, and then I'll let you answer, but I want you to speak to this because in some cases, like Apple, for example, you need to have a court order before they will give access to someone even with a death certificate. And so if those files and succession plans are not in place. So can you speak to that a little bit in terms of succession plans and what that looks like for businesses and the importance of it?
Was that for Ken or for myself?
No, that's for you, Garland, in terms of IT, because I'm talking about succession plan for IT, because yes, you can have succession plan for businesses in terms of that, but for technology, because the issues that I've been addressing are they can't get into a phone, a technology device, or a computer because it's master password. And in some cases, especially with the phone, the policies of that phone company is you have to restore to factory reset, which means you're going to delete all the information off of that device. And if you need critical information for the business and you can't get it without a court order, I was just asking you to speak to that in terms of having those plans in place for technology.
Understood. Well, I think it comes down to, first and foremost, you got to look at it from the top down. You know, what is your most critical information? Who needs access to it? And then in the case that you're not available, what is a written, complete dialogue of a flow of who should be able to get access to that information, who should be able to request access, and who should be denied access. And it comes down to not only, it could be things like business documents. You know, I think the hardest thing sometimes to find is a federal FEIN certificate if necessary, but that becomes very important from business continuity. And a lot of these things get delivered electronically and could be in somebody's email box that came in, you know, years ago. You start from the top down and you really do it almost like a business plan. You write it out, you categorize what's most important, and then you make sure that there's a clear, defined plan that is not reliant on technology. Meaning that it may be that you have a physical key, you have a physical safe, some one or two people know that they can go to a bank, they can go to X and Y and Z, and that information is stored successfully, physically, not on media, not on remote, you know, in a way that people can tangibly use that to get access to the digital information.
Okay, wonderful. Now I see Joseph on the line as well. Would you like to speak to that as well? We're talking about accessing your data. And the first part of the question, we talked about what are one of the biggest concerns or issue that you have found businesses are dealing with since the pandemic. Joseph, would you like to chime in?
Yeah, sure. So like the biggest ones that I've seen, there's been a few. Probably the major one is that for some time now, there's been some initiatives by some of the major companies out there, Google, Microsoft, IBM, et cetera, Amazon, to have, you know, going cloud first. And that didn't come to really fruition where organizations drug their feet for many years around digital transformation. And transform that organization to be more digital, to being cloud first. And so one of the first issues that they ran into was that a lot of organizations, they couldn't necessarily send their employees home and work effectively because they had all on-premise equipment in place. And so that was really one of the initial challenges. And that ranges from whether it be from their phone system to their file system, file servers, et cetera. So that was pretty huge. And then with that, then if you had to look at, you know, how to secure that data effectively. and not just using your Google Docs and things of that nature, or your personal mobile device to have that. And so those were some of the initial challenges that a lot of organizations that faced when they went home during this pandemic. And then we still see that. We still have customers that come in that are looking to somehow move their data to the clouds or to various other platforms around collaboration to make meetings more effectively in this new climate that we're working in.
You know, I love how you talked about on-premise versus the cloud. Never in a million years, we've been in business for a long time, and I've been at my office for 12 years. Do you know that last week we had an electrical fire at our office? And so never would have thought that in a million years that we would have a fire at our office. So thankfully, we're of course on the cloud and all of that, couldn't get in, couldn't all smoke everywhere. And that's right here in Vegas. And so I love that you brought up premise and cloud. Can you speak a little bit more for the audience that's listening that may not know what you mean by premise? And of course it's, you know, kind of self-explanatory, but the importance of having either off-site storage or cloud, or if that business owner is just so stuck on not going to the cloud because they have trust issues or privacy issues or whatever, and they haven't quite grown to that stage yet of understanding the importance of having your data in the cloud and that it is safe. And you know, can you speak to that for a moment in the instance of should the event, a fire or something happens on premise? Like,
Definitely. Definitely having a disaster recovery plan in place is important for any organization of any size. And so whether you're a small company or a large company, you definitely want to have a plan in place that, one, your data is secure, two, that it's accessible to you or on a needs basis for your organization. And so a lot of lessons were learned, particularly in corporate America, way back in 2001, which was one of the dark days of our American history. But shortly thereafter, a lot of companies, particularly on the larger side, invested heavily in doing some kind of disaster recovery plan, and then having that disaster recovery plan documented for the entire organization to utilize. And so as a result of that, you've seen organizations like Switch right here in Vegas come out of that, right? Where you have these large data centers that allow larger corporations, even smaller corporations, to have multiple copies of their data that's easily accessible throughout anywhere in the US. Now, Switch has grown exponentially because Nevada is considered a tier 1 state as pertains to disaster recovery, as pertains to natural disasters, meaning that we're not going to get a hurricane, we're not going to, have an earthquake. So majority of all of the companies situated on the West Coast have some kind of footprint in Switch. And so that trickled down to small organizations. And then what we kind of coined today as the cloud. That's kind of how we got there. And in terms of having these DR sites that can facilitate communications and move data pretty quickly. And so it's important for a company of any size to have that in place. We just coined it the cloud, but it's really just having some kind of offsite plan to store your data, applications, etc. Now with Microsoft 365 and with Google and some of the other ones, or Amazon Web Services, they've taken it even further, where they have, where you can do development, application development. They've implemented major security policies and things of that nature around like MFA, device management, and then hosting applications, period, to help you secure that data and to manage that data. But yes, it's very important for a small organization or even a large organization to definitely look to have a disaster recovery plan in place to make sure it's documented, easily accessible, and that you can get to your data wherever you are throughout the US or even the world for that matter.
It's funny that you mentioned Switch, because I chuckled because their protection is not only through encrypting the data and having top-notch security, but they carry Uzis and AK-47. They have automatic weapons. They have physical
Well, when you got all the financial transactions on the West Coast going through there, you better. So you got the DoD with major space in there. So
Yeah.
drone programs. So you name it, it's coming out of Switch. So.
Yeah, so they have some heavy security protection, not just technology, but manpower, gunpower.
Yeah, I got it right up on a couple of times going into Switch. My first time, I kind of walked up. I was supposed to meet somebody there. They were late, so I'm standing there, not even like 1 minute. So I feel there's people surrounding me. I'm just like, what is going on out here? Turn around. Guns everywhere. I'm just like, oh my God, this is some serious stuff. So then we go in, we go through the body screens and all that stuff. So it's pretty intense in there.
Your bits and bytes are definitely protected at Switch.
Yes,
now,
definitely.
30 seconds. If you can tell, for that business that's listening and don't have the first step on where to start with data recovery, what would your recommendation be? And then we'll go to our next question. It's about 30 seconds. What would be step one? They're like, you guys are talking about DR, data recovery. I don't
I probably definitely look to they definitely should be getting some of this information for whoever their technology provider is. And so, I have an organization called ECF Data, but, most small companies have some kind of IT services in place for their organization. And so that's probably the first place you look, and you start to kind of ask the questions there. And then from there, like I said, Microsoft 365, they have a terrific package, particularly for novice business, that's pretty encompassing with one license. So you can get, cloud security with that. You can get identity management with that, document management with that. So that's probably like the first organization you can kind of go to in terms of go to their website, pick a package that's already pre-assembled and get that deployed into your organization. Pretty straightforward via license.
Okay. Now, Garland, what are some tips you would give employers whose employees are at home and they're working from home? What are some tips that you would give to that employer who have employees working from home? What are some tips? Because in some cases, and I'll preface that, I know when I call like GoDaddy.com or my whole server company and all of that, and I know, they're working from home and I got to give credit card information and I got to give all this information, like who's protecting my bits and bytes, for all this information that I'm about to give you while you're at home, kids, husband, whoever, is my information secure? So what tips would you give to employers whose employees are working from home on protecting those bits and bytes with everybody being spread out at different locations?
I think the first thing would be to make sure that you have a written kind of rules of the road and kind of policy in place for your end users that are working from home. It can encompass things like their machines need to meet certain requirements. They must install an antivirus to make sure that the information that they're downloading is protected. They need to set up a separate user that their children or others do not have access to and lock them, as well as maybe physical access from their immediate access, physical access, so it protects that information or even access to that information. Don't write down passwords, protect them just as you would your car keys or your wallet outside in public, because that information can easily be exposed. And as well as ensure that if you're using a cloud product such as Dropbox or Box or Google Drive, that you are not saving critical business information and working on it on your local machine. It should always be saved back to the cloud or whatever your shared drive mechanism, but it should not primarily reside only on your computer. In those cases, it may not be recoverable, and that could be extremely business critical information that could be lost simply because of not following a consistent process.
Understood. All right, Joseph, would you like to add anything to that?
No, I think you summarized it pretty good.
All right, perfect. Alrighty, so continue right along. Can we talk a little bit about data encryption? Since we're talking about, it's hard to even have a conversation about protecting your data and protecting your bits and bytes without talking about encryption. for that layperson that don't understand all the jargon of computer technology terms, can you all explain encryption and whether it's through your email, going back and forth, ensuring your data is protected, whether they're using a third-party backup system such as iDrive or any others that you know, have encryption services as a part of their service. Can you talk a little bit about what encryption is and the importance of it? And how does one know if they're sending emails to verify that the data you're exchanging back and forth is encrypted? Whoever wants to answer that one.
Okay, so encryption, I guess in layman's terms, I guess it's a way of putting a password on your data for it to be accessed. And so it's a lot more in depth than that, but that's just at a high level of how I would explain it. And then most software at this point is encrypted in some kind of way. And so generally as it pertains to email, it's generally done with keys. So when sending an email, sometimes you see in your inbox, you'll get like a little badge next to the email. Letting you know that this data was encrypted when sending to you. And so it requires a token on both sides or a key on both sides. And so in order to access that, you would need that key or it would be a shared negotiated key for you to even see that email and to access the email. That's at a high level. Now, most products today, as I stated earlier, are encrypted. Now, some of the free email services, they are not, but most any business product, the data is encrypted. Now, there's various layers of encryption that you can apply to a product and application, things of that nature, when you're sending that out. And so, what was the other part of your question?
Well, I was just making sure that the user know how to verify that what they were sending was encrypted. So that was the last
Gotcha.
part. Like, how can they double check? Like, before I send this confidential data, that it is encrypted.
Yeah. So let's say like with the Exchange, which is the major email platform for business, that data is encrypted on the transport layer, right? When sending to, so there's really no good way to validate that or verify that, right? But as I was saying earlier, there's several different layers of encryption, right? And so the one to actually validate, and some organizations use it, I got a real estate company that uses this, is via certificate-based encryption. And so that's what I was talking about earlier with when you're sending a key on both sides that's shared in order for you to read and see that data. And then that's identified by the symbol within inside that inbox. But for a user, there's no really good way to see that outside just to know that you got to do your homework around the actual product that you're using and see what encryption standards that they're using to secure that data during transport.
Okay, awesome. And as you're saying that, I had a picture image of the website and that lock that you can see in the left-hand corner. So we talked about emails. There is a way for our audience to know that when you're going on a website, before you put your credit card or any confidential information in there, that you look for that lock, that key that's gonna let you know that, hey, this website is protected. And your browser is gonna let you know if your the website that you're visiting is on a secure site or not. So I'm gonna let Garland jump in as well. So we're talking about emails, we're talking about website, we're talking about data period, encryption. You can jump in there, Garland, if you wanna add anything on this topic in terms of encryption of data, what it means, and how you can verify that your information is indeed encrypted before you send it.
Okay, I think one thing I want to talk about is hard drive encryption. Because a lot of times we have a lot of end users and mobile users that may be walking around with sensitive corporate information. And they want to secure that data in case that information gets stolen. Now, it's a catch-22 situation. If you do, you need to make sure that you back up or have multiple copies of your encryption key, as Joseph alluded to, which is basically the recovery string to be able to take and decrypt that information in case it ever gets lost or you need to recover it in some once you encrypt it, if you lose your key, you basically can't get that data back, and it is completely unrecoverable by design. There's a lot of free programs and things that'll do that. Most common one on Dell Pro platforms, it's called Dell Data Protection. And it's a free for most laptop users that will allow you to basically encrypt and protect your data and mobile devices from basically that type of loss. But you still need to make sure that you make copies of that key. Through emails, it becomes a little bit harder because you have to make sure that not only yourself, but your receiving party has the same type of encryption software. If you decide to encrypt it and you're using an Office 365 encryption platform, and they may use a Google platform and they don't have that type of encryption to be able to receive that or decrypt that email, then it kind of loses its power. So it's more on a one-to-one basis of understanding that, hey, I want to encrypt it, or this is the type of files that we're going to be sending encrypted. These are the software platforms that we're using, and communicate that with the end users that will be receiving that type of information.
All righty, thank you so much. I love that you mentioned that key. I forgot about that. That is so critical as well. Yes, if you lose the key or forget the key, yes, it is uncoverable. So that is a great point to mention and to bring out. And I don't want to scare our audience and make you think that we're using all these big terms and jargon, but encryption, if we don't use no other term, you need to know encryption, ENCRYPTION, because that is very critical to protecting your bits and bytes. Alrighty, so we're going to move right along here. And what are some resources that can help businesses with their IT infrastructure that you want to recommend? We'll take that question and then we'll pause and take questions from the audience. But if either one want to jump in, what are some resources that businesses can use for their infrastructure setup?
Yeah, so I think you have some great resources on this call right now that can always lend a hand, help, so we definitely, I think, all have our own IT organizations that dabble in that to a degree. And then in terms of research, as I said earlier, I'm a big proponent of Microsoft and the work that they've done there around, like I said, around identity management, around device management, and then around their applications and services. And so they have a platform dedicated just to infrastructure called Azure. And then inside the Azure platform, you can run several different workloads and things of that nature, where it be virtual machines, meaning machines that are in the cloud from a virtual desktop and or server, or applications like a SQL server that you can run in the cloud, or container apps and things of that nature. They also have AI inside the Azure platform. And so if you want to do some kind of development, or you have an application that needs to do AI, you can do that inside of there. They have big computing, meaning that where you have hundreds of computers working together to crunch numbers, crunch data. And so all those things can be done from an infrastructure perspective inside the Azure. They even have firewalls, network services like load balancers, web applications, etc. You name it, it can be built out on that platform.
All righty, awesome. Garland, if you want to jump in, and I was going to say, we're going to have everyone put their contact information in the chat as well. So if you got a moment to do that now, we're going to also ask you to do that at the end if you haven't taken a moment to do it. But we're going to make sure everyone has their contact information for the resources as well, and for connectivity. But Garland, would you like to jump in?
One of the actually most powerful infrastructure systems that I've seen that's very flexible for small businesses and very, very easy to use is a company called Bytes. It's similar to Dropbox, where it's a repository where you can save files to the cloud, but they specialize specifically in industry and security. So they have a lot of plugins for a lot of different applications like Salesforce, Microsoft Office 365, They have things like video camera software review, and all kind of plugins that will kind of allow your business to kind of, function very quickly in a cloud situation with a lot of interaction and integration at a reasonable price point. So I think my recommendation would be to take a look at Box as a platform, because it's kind of an all-encompassing solution that handles the whole idea of backup, of cloud, of applications, as well as support for additional applications such as Office 365 and other major cloud integrations.
Can you type, I'm going to ask you and Joseph, if you all can type the resources into the chat so that it can be shared with all participants. You all will type those resources in the chat. That way, in case someone didn't catch that or couldn't understand, we have it in writing and typing. And if there's a website associated, if you would just put the URL in the chat so that they can go directly to that resource. And I show it's 2:35. So if there are any questions from the audience, if you all would just type them in the chat as well. We want to make sure that we answer your questions from the chat and that we address, because we want everyone to go away feeling empowered about protecting your data's bits and bytes. So if you type your questions in the chat, we'll go right along. Meanwhile, we'll continue our dialogue, and if I see any questions in the chat, we will go ahead and address them accordingly. We have about a few more minutes to wrap up. I'd say about less than 20 more minutes with a few more questions and dialogue before we prepare to pass it back over to our Urban Chamber of Commerce leadership. So with that being said, for our next 20 minutes or so or less, we're going to go back around the virtual boardroom and ask a few more questions, have a little bit more dialogue on how to protect your bits and bytes for businesses. Now, what additional advice or business tips do you have for the Urban Chamber members and other business owners that are in the virtual room? What other advice would you give them? We've talked about encryption, data, protecting your bits and bytes. We talked about email, encryption. We talked about hard drive encryption. We talked about website encryption. We've talked about protecting your data there. We've also talked about data recovery and making sure you have a data plan. We also talked about there's several ways of protecting your data with manpower, gun power, and technology power. That's just a joke there, but they really do have gun power. Anyway, it really is a true statement. But so we've talked quite a bit about various ways of protecting your data. And we also talked about the importance of having offsite data protection as well, so that in the instance of an emergency, unexpected, that you would have your backup data at another location. If you don't want to put it in the cloud, you've heard it requested and recommended that you have at least an off-premise backup plan, so that in the event of emergency, you can still retrieve that data quickly. The whole key about recovery is having a way to recover data quickly. That's the whole purpose. I mean, if you have to take days and weeks to recover your backup plan or to recover your data because you didn't have a plan, look at it in terms of business, because we're talking about all business owners and we have the chamber represented here. You do the math. How much would it cost your business if you did not have a data recovery? Think about all the data that you have right now on all of your systems. Count the cost, as I think my president always say, Urban Chamber president, count the cost. You do the math and you say, how much would it cost me in downtime, in money, revenue, if I did not have a backup at this moment of all the data? Think about all the data you have. If you don't have a backup plan or data recovery, how much would that cost you to recover? How much would it cost you to recover in time? If you don't protect your bits and bytes and you don't have it protected, you don't even have to have a desire like a fire. Your computer can just decide to crash. You don't even have to have a major disaster, a fire, a flood. Your computer, as I've seen them do, can just decide one day, wake up or not. and you don't have a computer, just go dead. Is your data protected? Are your bits and bytes protected? So my question to you in the audience, to just muse, is just a think about how much, well, you should write it down so that you can see how much is it gonna cost to recover this data if I had a crash this moment. How much would it cost me in time? How much would it cost me in resource revenue? All right, let's go back to our panel. So with that question, what advice, additional business tips would you give to our urban chamber members and other business owners in the room?
Yeah, so I would definitely have a documented policy. And you want to have several different policies. So one, as a business owner, you want to educate yourself, particularly around cybersecurity. You know, there's some base level training that you can just do an hour or two just so you can kind of understand and kind of go into more detail. But then you kind of want to have a policy around that you want your employees to be familiar with. And then making sure that they're aware of some of the issues, challenges by not securing or not being careful with data. And intellectual properties and things of that nature. And so part of our HR, when we onboard somebody, there is, you know, several policies that are in place that they have to read through and sign off on as it pertains to information security. And so you want that as part of either part of your handbook or even separate documents. And so there's companies out there that help you document those policies, or you can have some base level templates and then add what you need to them. So as part of that, you know, you as the business owner know, but then your employees know, most breaches happen from somebody inadvertently or advertently, you know, making a mistake, you know, with that data, and you know, leaving a back door to something, or you know, placing the data on their personal asset, you know, whether their mobile device, and their mobile device gets hacked, and then so then you as a business owner have lost intellectual properties because somebody just made the mistake of downloading that content to their mobile device. And so initially, so it should start with education, and then having that documented plan in place to do DR is probably the best advice I can give.
All right, Garland, would you like to jump in?
And, you know, I think it comes down to protecting yourself with a plan and testing your plan. Now, the thing that most people don't do is they don't test their plan. What happens if I'm not available? What happens if, you know, the computer were to go down? What happens if someone steals my office computers? Will my business be able to continue? Now, obviously, nobody wants to be in a position to test the plan under duress. So once you test your plan and go through and find out where your holes are, that really allows you to make sure that your business continuity plan is not just a plan or a theoretical, but like, okay, well, we tried it, and then we tried to restore from cloud, and then this is what happened. So in the future, we need to do this, or we need to do that to expedite it, or this is our backup system for our point of sale or our transactions or accounting in these types of situations. You know, coming up with that execution and making sure and testing against it is also a big part of it. So that's would be my best advice, you know, to, you know, in concert would be to make sure you have a plan and then test the plan.
Awesome. All righty, thank you. Now we have a question from the audience. If I am a brand new business or a very small existing business, should I still be concerned with doing the things you have mentioned?
Absolutely. Because you're the one in a case of your system going down where you're a sole proprietor and you lose critical customer information, you don't have a lot of recourse, either financially or from a technical standpoint, to be able to recover that or access to technical people. You can inadvertently put yourself in a huge liability type of situation. So especially the smaller you are, the more important it is to look towards these types of services. And the good part about the cloud services and remote services is that a lot of them are tailored to be able to provide you that higher level of enterprise services at a small fraction of the cost. So you get basically the benefits of being a big business while still having the flexibility of being a smaller or emerging business.
All right, anyone else want to jump in? Okay, so there's a part 2 to that question. Is there IT equipment or software we should purchase now to operate in a more virtual manner, especially if we are a small business operating remotely? That's part 2 of that question. Any IT equipment or software we should purchase now to operate in a more virtual manner, especially if we are a small business operating remotely?
Office 365 will be number 1.
I know Joseph is not going to push back to that, so I know corner to that one.
No,
I know
not at all. Not at all. Not at all.
In fact, I know there's nothing else to add on that one, so
Right.
we move right along from that one. I'm an amen corner as well. Office 365, absolutely. All righty, so we want to be able to answer any questions you may have. We have just a few more minutes, around less than 10 minutes or so. So there's still opportunity to ask questions if you have not already done so. Now, we've already talked about some things that employers need to do to secure their business data. So we're not going to re-emphasize that, but I do want to make sure that all of our audience know the resources that have been mentioned today. So I'm going to just recap once again some of the resources, and we ask that our guests, I see it here, that type into the chat if we missed anything, but I do see some of the resources. Just to recap, Box.com was mentioned by Garland Norris earlier. Box.com was one of the resources that were mentioned. I'm going to just go over some of the resources. Office 365, which of course you can find out more information about that. Let me ask this first. For Joseph, do you want them to find out more information about that through ECF data or directly to the site? I just want, for those that are, because I know you guys are Microsoft partners, so I don't want to overstep there, but let our audience know for the resource of Office 365, for either of you, how they can find out more information about that. Since we don't want to blindly send them off on a wild goose chase, so that you all can be a quote unquote resource, as we talked about earlier, rather than sending them off to Microsoft and then they're lost and don't know what they're looking for.
You definitely can reach out to me directly or to ECF data. And so we have resources that can help facilitate the license acquisition and then the services around that from a deployment standpoint, and then provide operational support on top of that. Then we also do some end user adoption as well, but primarily work through the Nevada Help Desk to get those pieces done.
And that's E as in egg, C as in Charlie, F as in Frank, data.com for those that are not sure about that. For our audience, yeah, I know what it is. I was just telling our audience. We're great community partners. And then I want to also say, Garland, what is your website so that you too can be a resource? What is the website for your company as well for IT? I see, oh, there it is, techgconsulting.com. That's T as in Tom, E as in egg, K as in kite, G as in ghost, consulting.com. And it is in the chat along with the email, Garland at techgconsulting.com. Perfect. All right. Wow. Time flies by when you're having fun. There's only like 7 minutes left for this segment, I tell you. And so we want to just freestyle now. If there's any topics off the record, any tech topics that can help that were not mentioned, we're going to have open dialogue for the next 6 minutes. Open dialogue for any tech topics that were not mentioned or discussed, for protecting your data, bits, and bytes. To our panelists, anything we didn't talk about that you feel is very important for our businesses to know in this season? What can be helpful to them as they're, in many cases, trying to wing it? And I will say, without name dropping lots of them, you'll know from the media, many of our agencies, even that are government agencies, that at the last minute had no idea of the impact that this pandemic would have. In some cases, even on some of the boards that I serve on, they were used to processing, I won't say the number because you know who it is, let's say 90% less of what they process now. And because of the pandemic, their workload increased by 300%. And so literally within a matter of 30 days of that unexpectancy because of the COVID. And so I'm saying that because there was a lot of uncertainties, a lot of expectations, a lot of things that were not expected that happened during this season. Hopefully we're kind of leveling off now since it's been about 6 months roughly since it started. But I want to go around for final comments of 5 minutes. So let's say 2 minutes each from our panelists. What was not covered that should be important information to know? Because I guarantee you those same businesses I'm talking about, had they known that, hey, in the event of an emergency, you should have A, B, C, and D. So fill in the blanks, our panelists. In the event of an emergency, you should already have done A, B, C, D. Fill in the blank. And if you only have A, B, C, that's fine. Whatever, fill in the blank. In the event of emergency, or to prepare for an emergency, make sure you do blank, blank, blank. Fill in the blanks.
Garland, want to take that one first?
All right, have a plan, test the plan, fix the plan.
That's good.
Bottom line is you gotta make sure that you gotta think about what happens if you're not able to go into your office tomorrow. What happens if my computer crashes? What happens if someone steals all my equipment? What will I do? And plan from there, test it, and if it didn't work, the plan doesn't work, then make a new plan.
Joseph, make
Yeah,
sure.
and I definitely concur. I definitely have a plan to consist of how to work remotely. What does that look like for your organization? You know, simple things like, you know, if you had a on-premise TPX solution, how would you receive phone calls? You know, so how does that employee now work from home? And so some of those things need to be considered. You know, even though a lot of organizations didn't particularly care for people working at home, you know, it's a necessity at this point. And so a lot of folks are spending a lot of money trying to get their organizations to where they can work from home. And so having that plan, as Garland alluded to, is key. And so what does that look like for your organization? You know, whether you're small or big, you know, and then, you know, putting that plan in place, you know, for a rainy day. Nobody knew that we'd be in a pandemic, but, you know, some organizations were very prepared for it. Some weren't. You know, we're still working through it at ECF, even though a lot of our organization was already pretty much remote throughout the US. We're still, you know, trying to figure out from how you measure effectiveness of your employees from working from home. You know, what does that look like? You know, what are some of the things that they're dealing with at home? And then how do you adjust to that? We had some of our best engineers become, from an engineering perspective, great, but terrible in terms of, you know, managing projects, because now you got folks having to, you know, manage their kids and have their kids in school while at home. And so nobody's really prepared for that, you know? So, you know, how do you, you know, make the meeting better, you know, when you have, you know, dogs in the background, our kids running around. And so those things, you know, you have to take in consideration now, and then kind of have a plan kind of around that as well.
All right, in my last 2 minutes, will it be and this is more personal opinion, will it be a hard transition or a smooth transition, this is personal opinion, for businesses to make the transition back? Whenever COVID is over, whenever all of this is behind us, whatever that's like, the end of this year, end of next year, 2024, I hear all kind of different, different estimated dates on when it will end. Whenever it ends, will it be a hard transition to go back from virtual to physically in the office, or will we ever go back? Personal opinions.
I don't think, yeah, it'll be definitely be a shift. I don't know that we will go back completely. I don't think anything will ever be back the same. I think this is something that's going to be ongoing from now on. And so I think we've learned so much in the last 6 months, 7 months, however long it's been, just around germs and spreading of germs and things of that nature. So you're going to have a segment of society that just, I'm never going back, right? And that's what their outlook on is going to be. And then you're going to have some that will. It's pretty interesting here in Vegas, because we still now, it's picked up where we still have all of California coming back into the city now. So, you got people that just like, man, I can't stand it no more. And they're out in the streets. So I don't think it'll ever be the same, though.
From a technology standpoint, I don't think it'll ever go back. I think there's too much efficiency and flexibility, and people will be in a situation where they say, what if this happens again? Why would I go back to the way things were when now I have all this flexibility to be able to do one or the other in case of emergency?
All righty, I want to read what's in the chat here. The question is, can Joseph briefly cover the 4 policy documents mentioned? And I believe that was Garland that mentioned those 4, but it says have a plan, test the plan, fix the plan. But it says Joseph, so whichever of you that mentioned the have a plan, test the plan, fix the plan, theft, loss of access, file access, key and recovery, succession plan. What if I pass or a key person passes away, as in dies, or is unavailable due to health reasons, or the actual, oh, if they're talking about encryption key, oh, that's it. You can be recovered. But go ahead, you can, whoever wants to answer that question. Theft, loss of access. So basically the question is if you can cover the 4 policy documents that were mentioned, and theft, loss of access, file access, key and recovery, succession plan. If a person passes, that's the key person. Like I told you guys, that's one of the main things I deal with now, and it's fighting and literally need a court order because the person is deceased. And some companies, that is their policy, and they will not. And in some cases, that same company actually got sued, which is why they have that policy in place, that only a court order, no matter if you have a death certificate, no matter if you have a power of attorney, a court order is the only way to get that. But I'll let you guys speak to that in terms of the 4 policy documents that you mentioned. So it's so critical to have backup copies and that a trusted person have that. But Joseph and Garland, if you would like to answer that last 2, that was just mentioned, the 4 policy documents, if you can briefly cover that in a minute.
Okay, I think the data security policy, incident, acceptable use, and backup and retention policy are, I think, is what we're discussing. So data security, how do you protect your data? What are your mechanisms? What are your tools? What are your recovery policies? Incidents, what happens when we have an exception? We have an terminated user that attempts to breach information. We have a situation where data is lost. How do we respond to that effectively? What is our policy? How do we recover? Acceptable use. What are people doing with their systems? What are they allowed to do? What are they not allowed to do? How do we police it? And what are the consequences for breach? And finally, backup and retention. How long do we back up information? Different business documents have different retention policies. 3 years, 7 years, 10 years, forever. How do we make sure that we don't keep data that we don't need? And how do we accurately dispose of that information?
All right, my time is up. I got to pass it over to our president, our UCC leadership. It's in your hands. Go right ahead.
Thank you all very much. I want to say thank you to our moderator, the Tech Queen, as well as the owner proprietor of Nevada Help Desk. She's using that dynamic animation there, but I want to say thank you to Dwana Malone for filling in or being our moderator today, not filling in. She was going to be the moderator. In addition to that, I want to thank both our panelists, Joseph Henderson with ECF Data, as well as Garland Norris with TechG Consulting. As you see, we have some dynamite information technology or IT resources here at the Urban Chamber. We'll be making this video available via our digital library for the Urban Chamber. In addition to that, I want to put a call out there and a suggestion out there. If you found this information useful and you want to interact with these individuals more, They are all part of the UCC Information Technology or IT Roundtable. So that's another way to make contact with them. So thank you again, everyone, for being part of today's Ducks in a Row Session 3 seminar, where we talked about how we want to help you make sure that you protect your bits and bytes. Thank you all very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks for having us. Bye-bye.